Hello and welcome to this first episode of the new year of India First. Here's wishing all our viewers a very happy and prosperous 2017. With the new year, the Indian Army and the Indian Air Force have got new chiefs commanding them as they go along. And both the chiefs will have longish tenures than normally they get, their predecessors have got. And therefore, we are looking at what are the challenges that they face and what are the main responsibilities that they will undergo as days pass and as months go as far as the Indian Army and the Indian Air Force is concerned. And to discuss all of this, what state both the Indian Army and the Indian Air Force are in and what they should be looking at in the near future. We have a very eminent panel with us. To my immediate left, Air Marshal P.S. Ahluwalia, the former Commander-in-Chief of the Western Air Command, which is the sword arm of the Indian Air Force, and Lieutenant Rameshwar Roy to his left, who has commanded troops in Kashmir, also the GOC of the 16 Corps, which is deployed on the line of control south of Pir Panjal, and has also had very rich staff experience. Both of you welcome, and let me wish both of you a very happy 2017.
Thank you. Thank you.
If I can start with you, Air Marshal, the Air Force, of course, has now got a new chief, and according to the seniority and the merit or whatever, and he has taken over. There's been a change of commanders. There's been a new vice chief. If you look ahead, what are the current challenges that the Air Force has, and what they should be looking at as they go along?
Yes, certainly. I think this is a very good question. That what should they be thinking about? And I think the first thing we need to look at is our threat perception. Has our threat perception changed? Is it something different now than what used to be? And to my mind, I think the threat perception from the western borders is different from what the northern borders are.
Sure.
Western borders, we must have enough capability for conventional warfare. So we must have superiority in the air. We must have counter surface force operation capability. We must have all those things. But when you come to the north, I think the equation will have to change a bit, and the threat would be from missiles.
That's right.
And the missile threat will have to be looked at differently. That means we should have an integrated air and missile defense system. The ballistic missile defense system should be in place.
Sure.
And I think these are the things we need to look at and analyze, are we deficient or not? Just to talk about combat aircraft is not really air power.
True.
Air power, the combat aircraft will certainly be in the forefront, but they have to be supported. Very importantly for things like, ISR.
Exactly.
That's the intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance,
Yeah.
because that's what's going to help you for targeting. Kargil would never have happened if we had strategic reconnaissance. There's a gap between satellite reconnaissance and tactical reconnaissance.
Sure.
That's strategic reconnaissance.
That needs to be filled now.
That needs to be filled. And if you don't have that, then where are you going to send your combat aircraft?
Right.
And if we had had that, Kargil would not have happened, because Gulteri, Gilgit, Skardu, we would have monitored all this.
Sure.
And the army, as I'm sure the general will agree with me, needs time. They need to concentrate.
Sure.
They need to collect before they actually go on the offensive.
Absolutely.
And we would have known that.
Right.
So these are the gaps that need to be filled, and they need to be filled immediately. And that's what will be the challenge for the new chief.
Yes, in fact, if you remember, he's also, when he was still vice chief, he spoke about the Indian Air Force's challenge, or even the apprehension that it may not be ready for a two-front war, is what he had said publicly in public domain, which I think actually hits the nub of the matter. And as you said, the northern challenge is different, the western challenge is different. So what should he be looking at? What should he be concentrating on?
You see, the first thing I like to clarify here, that when people talk about two-front war, they relate it immediately to the number of squadrons.
Yes.
Now, I think that is not entirely, to my mind, the correct way of looking at it.
Right.
I would have wanted, and I want an Air Force, in my perception, to be a capability-based, a balanced force structure, a balanced force to be able to take on any challenges that might arise in the future,
Right.
but of course based on the emerging threats.
Sure.
So therefore, if I have to talk only about the number of squadrons,
No.
I don't think that would be the right way of going about it.
We will talk about those numbers and why the numbers are not so important
Right.
to talk about. But let me come to the army, which is so large and is spread all across the country, has multiple challenges in terms of deployment, in terms of manpower management, and the new chief, General Rawat, starts off on a little bit of a controversy, but I think has thankfully died down because of the statements made by the other two officers who were superseded. So what in your view remains his foremost challenge?
You see, Nitin, as far as the army is concerned, the biggest challenge to the army is the spectrum of warfare that is emerging now. In actual terms, one would like to call it what is being now touted as the hybrid warfare.
Sure.
This possibility is emerging even stronger and bigger due to the fact that if you look at the recent support that China has given to the others not
Masood
being on
Azhar's
the list.
not banning, yeah.
To me, it appears there is a bit of shift in strategy. While earlier it believed that Pakistan is capable of balancing out India in terms of conventional forces,
Sure.
that is taking a shift now that Pakistan itself has said that in terms of conventional edge, it is lagging behind.
Sure.
India is far ahead. And therefore, it has now switched over to what is now popularly calling it tactical nuclear weapons, and in that realm,
Right.
knowing fully well that the kind of proximity of these countries called India, China, Pakistan, it's not possible to use such a weapon.
Sure.
Therefore, the only third possibility where India is unable to match is this so-called strategic assets that Musharraf has been calling them as, and therefore the terrorists.
And the continuous, therefore, the war in in J&K.
Yes, and the continuous engagement of the Indian army into this kind of a warfare, side by side having the conventional capability as well, and also in the nuclear realm.
Right.
So therefore, for army, the spectrum of warfare that is emerging is going to be very, very complex. Let me give you one more indicator.
Right.
Recently, there has been a talk between Pakistan, Russia, China on the issue of Afghanistan.
Right.
India has totally been left out.
Yes.
Once again, there are talks of the good Taliban and the bad Taliban. Now, I don't think that Indian army can overlook this kind of a dynamics which is emerging in South Asia right now, with the Americans not really wanting to as deeply get involved as they were. Therefore, for us, the conventional threat challenge, at the same time the hybrid challenge, both has to be matched, and the soldiers' capabilities and the leaders' capabilities have really to be put at a test all the time.
And therefore, the new chief will have to actually lead from the front and see to it that all the wherewithal is given to the
Yes, he will have to actually focus at three things. One, that we've been talking of modernization of the Indian army itself, lagging behind like anybody can talk.
There's a hollowness.
See, there's a hollowness of all various kinds of things. I don't want to go into those details right now. The second issue is that the capability of the soldier, his fatigue. He has to get the enablers in terms of technology so that the fatigue factor can be reduced. And at the same time, while he does all this on 364, 24/7, 365 day basis, at the same time he cannot afford to lose his conventional edge also, because that particular thing can take its shape on the western front also, on the northern front also. And that is also a very big challenge that chief has to look into.
We'll look at that. Let me come back to the Air Force. We were talking about the squadrons, Marshal. And if we
can I mention something before that?
Please, please do.
Just as a matter of interest here.
Yes.
I think we are once again, like you said, the crossroads. Why? Because at this point in time, we've got to be very clear that we cannot, just like the General mentioned, we cannot go towards only terrorism, anti-insurgency, proxy war. We have to primarily have the edge as far as conventional warfare is concerned. That should be the primary responsibility. But we have to be very cautious that we do not let the primary objective be overtaken by the secondary objective, which would be anti-insurgency terrorism. Because that is not the function entirely of the army. So therefore, we might consider that to leave the army to do its primary role. Why? Because the training the force levels, the kind of equipment that you need is going to be different.
Absolutely.
Monies are going to be involved.
Correct.
So therefore, it would be prudent, perhaps as a recommendation, to have a force.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have this anti-insurgency problem if you perceive for the next 10 years,
Yes.
20 years.
Sure.
So therefore, you must have a force which should be dedicated only for this kind of a job.
Right.
And we should have for conventional warfare the capability existing all the time.
That's what I think the general also has in mind.
Nitin, see, debate is actually now becoming more realistic.
Yes.
And why I'm saying more realistic? Because the problem here is that today, if you really compare the armed forces strength versus the central armed police forces strength,
Yes.
is quite close to like almost 8.5 lakhs.
Yes.
And we are around 13.5 to 14 lakhs.
Yes.
The point is that the central armed police forces can no longer be hiding into the shadows of the policing jobs, you know.
Yes.
They have to increase their capabilities.
Exactly.
And therefore, once they increase their capability, it is only then and then it's possible that
For the
army
army
can
to
then
turn
focus
its-
on the primary role.
on the primary
right
role.
now, that is not happening.
And actually, the army has done this for 25 years or 26 years in Kashmir, and now it needs to sort
At
of
the,
come down a
at
little
the
bit.
cost of degradation of the conventional capability.
Yes.
We have done it for long.
Yes.
It's time that the nation looks at a equal kind of a distribution.
Retweaking the
Yes,
whole equation. Yes.
absolutely. Without that, it is not going to be possible.
I think that's a very valid point, and I think that needs to be, I think, perhaps one of the major challenges of the army chief to convince the government
Yes.
that we need to retweak. And
Absolutely.
we have done Rashtriya Rifles for 25 years, but maybe it's time for the CAPFs to step up.
A dedicated
And-
anti-insurgency
Absolutely. force.
stroke anti-terrorist organization.
Sure.
We need to get on to that.
No, I agree. But let me come back to the Air Force, Marshal. We were talking about the numbers, the
Yes,
squadrons.
yes.
I think for too long we have debated or sort of concentrated on this debate that we need 45 squadrons.
Yes.
Don't you think it's a little unrealistic?
Absolutely, and just like I mentioned before,
Yeah.
that we want a balanced force. We want a force which is structured around the emerging threats,
Right.
and therefore it is very crucial to have capability-based Air Force.
Sure.
We must think of the capability that is available to us. I know many people may not like what I'm saying, but a MiG-21
Yes.
with carrying 1 ton
Of fuel.
of weight of ordnance,
Of ordnance, yeah.
and going only 100 kilometers
Right.
versus a modern day aircraft which will carry 8 times
tons.
more and go 8 times more the distance
Right.
with more reliability, less vulnerability, and perform much better.
Right.
Do I need this to be equated with that? Do I need the number of squadrons to be the same? I'd only like to talk about the revenue budget in this
Sure.
case, because the revenue budget is very, very crucial, and for the Army it's 80%.
Yes.
But for the Air Force it's still something like 51%, and for the Navy is 48%. In other words, the revenue budget will keep increasing.
Sure.
And as it keeps increasing, there'll be less funds available for purchasing new equipment,
That
modern
degrades
equipment.
capability. That degrades capability.
So therefore, it would be better to have a smaller,
Sure.
more competent,
Lethal.
more lethal force available to us,
Sure.
which will reduce our revenue budget,
Right.
but at the same time be able to ensure that the security of the country is in good hands.
Right.
It's a good technology available to us.
Absolutely. So, on that note also, similarly, the Army has to also ensure that the infrastructure projects on the line of actual control with China in the high Himalayas needs to be not only brought at par with what is there across the border. It will take a long time, but at least speeded up and the timelines adhered to. Isn't that a big challenge also?
Nitin, infrastructure is a big challenge, but at the same time we also would like to state that the big challenge is the factor of the coordination. If we have to optimize our budget, like the Air Marshal has said,
Right.
and our acquisitions and our entire capability
Sure.
based existence, then we need to have a better coordination between the services as well, the same way as I mentioned
And
about
pool
the CAPS.
the resources.
Yes, because with that then we'll be able to sort of maximize
Right.
whatever structures we make, whatever acquisitions we go in for.
Sure.
That coordination also has actually been not up to the
Been up
level
to
one would
the mark.
like it to have.
Yeah, but we'll talk about this tri-service requirements
Yeah.
and how we can ensure
Yeah.
that maximum resources can be utilized. But we'll do all this after a quick break. Don't go anywhere. You're watching India First.
रुखसाना, आज भी तुम अपना फॉर्म भरने पोस्ट ऑफिस नहीं आई?
आप तो जानते हैं शीला जी,
दानिश के अब्बू तो अब रहे नहीं, बाहर के हर काम के लिए दूसरों के भरोसे रहना पड़ता है।
तो अब निकलो। अल्पसंख्यक मंत्रालय की इस नई रोशनी योजना में तुम जैसी हजारों महिलाओं में नेतृत्व क्षमता को बढ़ाया जा रहा है।
आज की औरत अब घर से खुद बाहर आएगी और बनाएगी अपना जीवन बेहतर। अल्पसंख्यक मंत्रालय की नई रोशनी योजना आपके लिए, सीखें और सशक्त बने।
मदद हमारी, मंजिल आपकी।
इन दिनों अपडेटेड रेज्यूमे रखना बेहद जरूरी है। यस माइन प्रफुल्ल कुमार, मेजर प्रफुल्ल कुमार, पैरा स्पेशल फोर्सेस, 3 साल हॉस्टाइल जोन में टफ था। JNK में स्पेशल सर्विस, कुछ नए दोस्त बनाए, कॉम्बैट फ्री फॉल स्पेशलिस्ट, बलिदान के लिए तैयार। जैसा आप देख सकते हैं, आई वेयर माई हार्ट ऑन माई स्लीव एंड माई रेज्यूमे ऑन माई यूनिफॉर्म। विच अदर कंपनी लेट्स यू डू दैट?
हम है भारत के सबसे एक्साइटिंग वर्कप्लेस और हम दे रहे हैं आपको एक ऑफर। भारतीय सेना, आम नहीं ये जिंदगी।
नो कैश।
क्यों अंकल, फ्री में दे रहे हो क्या?
सिर्फ फ्री नहीं बेटा, कैश फ्री। डेबिट कार्ड है?
ओह
बस कार्ड डालो, ATM पिन डालो और पे करो। बेटा कैश की आदत बदलो।
प्रधानमंत्री ग्राम सड़क योजना ने हम गांव वालों के लिए तरक्की के रास्ते खोल दिए।
सड़क के गड्ढों की फोटो खींच रहे हो? कोई खास बात है क्या?
अरे काका, मेरे मोबाइल फोन में मेरी सड़क ऐप है, जिससे प्रधानमंत्री ग्राम सड़क से जुड़ी कोई भी जानकारी सरकार तक भेजी जा सकती है। सड़क से जुड़े सुझाव या शिकायत पर सरकार वाजिब कार्यवाही करती है।
प्रधानमंत्री ग्राम सड़क से जुड़ी कोई भी बात, मेरी सड़क एंड्रॉइड ऐप अब हर पल मेरे साथ।
सब ठीक रहा?
हाँ, बेटे के लिए इससे अच्छा रिश्ता नहीं मिलेगा।
और दहेज?
कह दिया, दहेज में हमें कुछ नहीं चाहिए।
3 बेटियों को दहेज देने के बाद जब लेने की बारी आई तो आप चुप रह गए।
माँ, मैं दहेज नहीं लूंगा, मैं खुद समर्थ हूँ। जो चाहिए मैं खुद कमाकर खरीद सकता हूँ।
बेटियों की माँ होकर भी मैं भूल गई कि मेरी होने वाली बहू भी किसी की बेटी है। नहीं चाहिए हमें दहेज।
दहेज लेना और दहेज देना कानूनन अपराध है।
जी मैं गैस कंपनी से आया हूँ, गैस चूल्हा और पाइप चेक करने हैं।
आइए। क्या आपको इस व्यक्ति से इसका पहचान पत्र नहीं मांगना चाहिए था?
मैडम पाइप से गैस लीक हो रही है, तुरंत बदलना होगा वरना जानलेवा हादसा हो सकता है।
आप पाइप बदल देंगे?
500 रुपए लगेंगे।
क्या आपको तसल्ली नहीं करनी चाहिए थी कि आपकी गैस पाइप वाकई ही खराब है?
अपने चूल्हे, गैस पाइप आदि की जांच तथा सर्विस अपने ऑथराइज्ड डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर से ही करवाएं।
क्या बात है राशिद, फर्स्ट डिवीजन में पोस्ट ग्रेजुएशन करने के बाद भी तुम उदास हो? लेकिन सर वो सोच रहे होगे कि खर्चा कहाँ से आएगा? हाँ, चिंता मत करो, क्योंकि अब तुम्हारे साथ है मौलाना आजाद नेशनल फेलोशिप।
फेलोशिप हमारे लिए सर?
हाँ, तुम्हारे लिए और अल्पसंख्यक समुदाय के उन स्टूडेंट्स के लिए जिनकी सालाना पारिवारिक आय 2.5 लाख रुपए से कम है और जिन्होंने किसी भी सरकारी विश्वविद्यालय से जूनियर रिसर्च फेलोशिप या एमफिल के लिए आवेदन दिया।
मदद हमारी, मंजिल आपकी।
मैम, आपकी फीस कल देती हूँ। आज बैंक बंद था।
बैंक क्यों? स्टेट बैंक बडी है ना।
स्टेट बैंक बडी आपके पास भी?
हाँ, क्यों नहीं। स्टेट बैंक बडी डाउनलोड किया, पिन डाला और पे किया। सिंपल। बेटे कैश की आदत बदलो।
Welcome back. You are watching India First and we are discussing the challenges that the two new chiefs of both the Indian Army and the Indian Air Force face. Marshal, we were talking about the chiefs and also their challenges. What in your view the chiefs should be, they are basically supposed to lead and give a policy direction. What do you think the air chief should be looking at?
Well, I think the function of the air chief in our system is not only to be a good staff officer, shall we say, to the government,
yes,
but also to ensure that the operational capability is there. So he's got to mix and match the two.
Right.
He's got to ensure that his coordination or actually his communication with the government is in tandem with what is firstly expected of him,
right,
and expected of the service,
sure,
and whether the service has all the kind of resources that it needs,
correct,
and what it can do and what it can't do.
Sure.
And in no, in absolutely unambiguous terms, he should be able to explain it to the government,
yeah,
because this is very, very crucial. You need commanders who can stand up and call a spade in the interest. We don't want to go through 1962
sure,
ever again.
Sure.
And that will happen if you got too many people who are willing and accepting to agree to whatever is told to them.
Right. So therefore they have to be thoroughly professional. In their mind.
And not only that, I'd like to make a statement here that it's the leadership in the military that's very, very crucial.
Sure.
We have to ensure that we train our personnel to come up with the right kind of leadership, which means they should have the requisite experience and the expertise to be able to lead a warfighting machine like the armed forces.
No, I agree. General Roy, this is one of the things that has been plaguing the Indian Army especially. One is of course the officer shortage. Secondly, the exposure or the kind of wide spectrum exposure that officers need to get in the challenges that they will face. I'm talking about junior officers, middle level officers, so that they can become leaders, tomorrow's leaders. Is that something that the chief should look at?
Nitin, I would say that before that, chief has to look at the voids which are existing.
Okay.
Because first priority has to be the modernization and filling up of the voids, without which any amount of training on the old obsolete equipment is not going to give you the capability that you are looking for. That is first issue.
Yes.
Now the second issue that he needs to look at is the so-called quality of manpower.
Yeah.
The quality of manpower our Indian Army has not really faced in terms of the quality, and that's the reason why many a times the Army has been criticized for its deficiencies.
Sure.
Shortage of officers, I would say, is not as much as the fact that the Army in its capability to perform has been stretched
to its limits.
And that stretching is not going to end so soon. So from that perspective, I'll say, like the earlier point which I made, the modernization or the automation and such like gadgetry which is coming in, which helps reduce the fatigue of the soldier. Those are the issues that need to be
which aids
put
with
into
the soldier in performing his duties.
As far as the exposure is concerned in the Indian Army, as far as the conventional battle or the hybrid warfare or the anti-terrorist operations, on these front I think we have got a huge amount of experience and exposure that our officers are getting, not only within the country, but we have these large number of the joint exercises which have been planned with all the other nations, including China for that matter. And therefore that experience wise I will say is not a big issue, but yes, the manpower deficiencies which keeps occurring again and again, that also needs to be seriously looked at, and that is wherein the issues of budgeting for the equipment comes in, issue of looking after the soldier in terms of his service conditions and the rest of the things are concerned, which again keeps coming into schism. I know there is no limit of expectations, but what is reasonable to make sure that he stays or he continues to perform at his optimum best,
and he needs to be supported for that. The nation needs to support.
I'd like to.
We got a minute or so.
I'll quickly run through this. That technology per se is excellent. Technology per se is required. But technology per se will not make you win wars.
Sure.
It is the man in the loop.
Absolutely.
So what I'm referring to, and just like what you said, was that the kind of training and the expertise. Yes, tactical training, in-service training, there's plenty of it.
Yes.
But the exposure for strategic thinking, that is very, very crucial.
Exactly.
And that we need to have integration, we need to have our officers actually going into universities, going and studying with them. We need to interact with, shall we say, the Ministry of External Affairs. We need to interact with the Ministry of Finance, so that you have an overall view available to the leadership in the services, so that when they go up to that level, they're not thinking tactical, they are thinking strategic.
Sure. And that I think is one of the things, the challenge, because the tactical training is all right, and I think both they do it regularly, both in the Air Force and the Army, and I'm sure in the Navy too. But because technology is making such leaps and bounds, it's really changing by leaps and bounds. And therefore, they need to not only keep pace with technology, but also, as you said, the challenges in the world are changing, every day almost. I mean, you don't know which way the geopolitics will turn, given what is happening with the US and with the Chinese, or what's going to happen in the West Asian region. So therefore, I think all that we can say is good luck to the new chiefs, and the challenges that they face, they must perform. They have been selected to perform and actually deliver. And on that note, I think we have run completely out of time. We will come back again in a fortnight's time. But till then, goodbye and good night.